Well, hello, free people of the Rocky Mountain region. My name is Brandon, and welcome to this Free State Colorado interview. The mission of Free State Colorado is to promote a culture of liberty, freedom of the individual, and a free market. Today, I'm joined by Brian Piotter, an engineer, family man, and Libertarian Party candidate for U.S. Senate right here in Colorado. Now, Brian is one of the top polling libertarians in the United States for the 2022 election. And recently, Brian's campaign shook the political landscape of Colorado when he received an endorsement from Republican state representative and runner up primary candidate for U.S. Senate, Ron Hanks. Well, Brian, I hope you are well, and thank you for joining me today.
Thank you. Welcome to be here.
Perfect. Well, Brian, tell us a little bit about yourself. Who are you? What is your background?
I got a degree in engineering, in aerospace engineering from New Mexico State. Great school. You should go there if you're looking at schools. Spent the last 10 years in the aerospace industry building plane parts for Boeing and Airbus. I have 3 kids with number 4 on the way. And I'm running for U.S. Senate to send a message to the system that your options suck and we want a third option.
Well, that's awesome, Brian. Well, that was my next question. Can you explain a little bit, why did you decide to run for U.S. Senate?
I decided to run for U.S. Senate because I feel like the current establishment options don't always reflect what we want to vote for. And also, as the Libertarians should do around the country, we should fill the spots so that we have an opportunity to play a part in this game, whether that is holding leverage over other parties or just getting a message out there to change minds. We need to be involved and we need to have a voice for liberty on the ballot.
I like it. I like the strategy behind it, because so often I've heard over the years working in politics that, third parties are ineffective or not useful. But I think you hit the nail on the head about how a third party can be useful and have a voice, have a seat at the table, and actually have influence in our election. So that's pretty exciting.
Yes, and to be honest, if I had the views I have, I could never make it in the Republican Party or the Democrat Party. So what am I supposed to do? So if I'm trying to share a message of limited constitutional government that this country was founded on, that's completely absent from the current conversation if the Libertarian Party is not there.
That's a great point. I've talked to so many people nowadays who see so little difference between the Democrats and the Republicans, basically working for the same people and having the same values. You're right. I can't think of a lot of candidates who have that voice for limited constitutional government, people who are going to be a little bit more bold in their messaging and speak out about issues that a lot of us care about. So pretty cool. I love it.
Yeah, and specifically, one thing that both sides don't understand is what the Constitution means. Republicans will often get up and say, we should pass a law to do this. And the Democrats will stand up and say, we should pass a law to do the opposite of that. But neither of them have any constitutional authority to pass that law, and no one cares. So what is the point of the Constitution if no one's read it, or it apparently doesn't matter? And if you can just say the word emergency, well, now you can throw the whole book out. Now you can just do whatever you feel like.
So in a lot of ways, it seems like, Brian, you're kind of a restoring a path to sanity, back to kind of some of these values that made our country free, made us as prosperous as we are, because, nobody else is really talking about them and nobody's willing to stand up for the Constitution. So applauding you for doing that, sir.
Thanks, Brandon. And you know what? It's a bunch of life lessons when you run for office. I encourage anybody watching or listening to do it. You learn a whole lot about people and what people are willing to say to you when they find out you're running for office. Also, a lot of misperceptions about how it works and what you're doing. And, what are you doing with your campaign staff this week? It's like, well, I don't have a campaign staff. So what would you like to do this week for me? You're like, come on in, learn what it's like, be a part of it, volunteer.
Nice. Awesome. Well, so I want to talk a little bit about Ron Hank's endorsement. For a lot of Republicans, I mean, he got over 200,000 votes in the primary election this June. He's been kind of a voice at the state capitol, one of our only elected representatives who is running for higher office this year. And, it didn't work out for him, but he kind of represents some of those values that it seems like he's now saying you're somebody he endorses, you're somebody that's going to carry that mantle for conservative leadership here in Colorado. So in Ron Hank's endorsement, he said, quote, Brian Piotter is the only conservative on the ballot for U.S. Senate, end quote. I thought that was a great line, and it really sums up the difference between you and the Republican in the race. So, Brian, what are the conservative values your campaign is embracing?
I would start with the fact that I'm pro-life. I believe that life begins at conception. The current federal government is extremely pro-abortion. We are not a neutral government. There's a lot of money spent on different kinds of research and different kinds of there's an abortion industrial complex, just like the military industrial complex. People like Dr. Fauci spend millions of dollars using embryos taken from abortions. There's something you can Google called humanized mice. It's where they take an embryo as a result of an abortion and graft it onto a mouse. Then they can use that mouse to test drugs because it's closer to humans. And you can just Google that. That's a thing. We spend our tax dollars on that. I want to end all of that funding. Second Amendment, second thing, I think we should all have the right to keep and bear arms. That everything that says you need to register it or background check or you can't have this kind of pistol grip is illegal and should be shut down, removed. Anybody who has enforced that should be put in jail. It is an infringement on our Second Amendment. Other conservative principles, I think the 10th Amendment is not a also ran. It's not something you can ignore. It means that if you do not have a constitutional amendment that gives you the right, that it is left for the states. So things like the Department of Education should not exist. Department of pick one. Transportation Security Administration should not exist. You need a constitutional amendment to give yourself that authority. The argument of, well, no one's going to stop us is not a good argument.
Wow.
Do you have any other questions, Brandon?
Yeah, so specifically, I mean, it is interesting, I think, and it's inspiring to a lot of people that you're providing a choice for the pro-life movement. I've been it's a supporter of the pro-life movement. I'm 100% pro-life personally myself, so I'm thankful that somebody is stepping up and speaking out in defense of the unborn. It seems like so many of Republicans, or at least the establishment Republicans in the state level, are willing to cede that issue if it means they can win. So I find that really interesting, and I think that's a really key component of your campaign.
Absolutely, 100%. It's been the biggest issue I've always had with the Libertarian Party, and it wasn't until the Mises Caucus was founded and I discovered that there are pro-life people inside the Libertarian Party through the Mises Caucus that I was able to join the movement and become a part of it. And that is why I can be a Libertarian today. At the National Convention this May, we removed the pro-abortion plank that had been there for a while. And now we have the freedom to be pro-life and be Libertarian.
Wow. Yeah, and of course, the Second Amendment is a major issue. I know that it's scary to think about if we haven't had our gun rights or our Second Amendment rights during the whole COVID era, what the government could have gotten away with. And here in Colorado specifically, we see Democrats and some Republicans chipping away at our Second Amendment rights every chance they get, whether it's red flag gun confiscation and weapon bans, things like that. So it's great to see somebody out there who's bold, who's going to stand up for our rights, for defending life in all its forms, right? Whether it's a small baby that's in the womb or an adult who's living in their house, you're standing up to defend those rights. So that's pretty cool.
People don't realize how quickly this has happened. My parents, when they were born, at that time, you could walk into a hardware store and buy a machine gun without a tax stamp. You just walk in and walk out. It's been in the last generation's lifetime that they've chipped away at it so completely. Now you can't buy magazines over a certain limit, even though that doesn't matter at all. These laws on what's legal and what's illegal are crazy. This kind of strap, this kind of trigger, this kind of angle, this kind of piece of plastic, legal, illegal, legal, illegal. No one knows unless you are completely up to date. And the point of that is to make things difficult on people who follow the law so that they can arrest or take things away from you arbitrarily, hoping that people will just give up and say, I don't want to bother with that. I don't understand it. I don't know what's legal. I'm just not going to get into it. Either that or it's just pure incompetence, which I'd say is like maybe 50-50. Like maybe there's just somebody making random laws just because he's bored at work in a government job.
Right. Is it how much of it's malice, how much of it's incompetence? Sometimes it's hard to tell. You almost hope it's incompetence, but I'm not so sure all the time.
That is something I do take solace in, is that at least the government's incompetent. So they track all my information, but that doesn't mean that they're competently using that information to, make my life worse. They have it and they can make my life worse, right? They just aren't necessarily going to be competent about doing that all the time.
Yeah, one benefit to a bureaucracy is its inefficiency and inability to achieve its goals. So Brian, yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, think about anything they start. The war on poverty gets worse. The war on drugs, there's more drugs than ever, killing more people than ever. I agree with the fact that we want less people dying of drugs. The current solution is doing the opposite of what it's supposed to do. And that's because that's a symptom of the way the government bureaucracies work.
Nice. Yeah. And I was going to ask you a little bit about your stance on legal cannabis and the drug war in general, I suppose, because coming from a little bit more of a conservative background, I was wondering what your thoughts are on Colorado's legal cannabis and how do you feel about that?
I'll tell you one thing, I don't eat sugar. I think that that's a poison that kills you over the course of 50 years. I don't smoke cigarettes and I don't drink alcohol. And saying that, I can encourage you to do the same, but I don't think you should be put in prison if you don't. So I think that marijuana is bad for you as a drug. It can cause issues with you and it's not perfect. It's not a miracle drug. It's not necessarily going to kill you if you smoke one joint. I would encourage you not to smoke in general, but that doesn't mean that you should go to jail because you did. I don't think that putting someone in a cage for 30 years or 10 years makes society better. I don't think it reforms anybody for doing anything and generally makes criminals out of somebody who wasn't a criminal. On top of it, I think that the federal level is not the right place for any kind of drug enforcement, that the DEA moves responsibility to DC, and that makes it okay for drugs to be, or like whatever is going on in a community to happen. And you can point fingers at the incompetence of somebody far away. It would be better for the local community to decide on its own what the laws are and to enforce them there. We don't need to send tax money to Washington, D.C. and have federal prisons. We could manage it inside of each state individually. And I don't see any reason why Mississippi could be super hardline and California could be super open and we both be a part of the same country.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's a great viewpoint that especially as somebody seeking federal office, this decentralized or federal type of system where each state is its own little experiment in democracy or representative government, to be more precise, in which they can enact laws that are based on the customs and background and traditions of their communities. So yeah, I mean, that makes a lot of sense. Instead of these politicians trying to push this one size fits all solution on every single person, on a 350 different million people in the country, it makes sense that local communities, they're different. There's different people in different areas and they have different values, and let them make their own decisions about what they want to do. So
and we got to be honest about the fact that they've failed at what they've been trying to do for 50 years. So even if we all agree in all 50 states that we want to do the same thing that they've been trying to do, it's time to say we give up. Let's try something different. Let's try 50 different versions of this, because what you're doing on the federal level is mostly failure. on top of it, they do lots of terrible things to innocent people, like civil asset forfeiture, which is something I'm getting better at saying quickly. But, there's innocent people who lose things to the government because the government says, oh, the drug war, you had cash on you. You're bad. I guess you're going to have to sue us to get this money back. In the meantime, you might lose your business. You might not be able to do whatever you were trying to do. That happens every day. I heard a statistic, which I'll go ahead and quote since I don't have the facts, that the government has seized more assets than robbers in the last year through civil asset forfeiture, which I'll go ahead and
Wow.
believe. But if you want to fact check me and let me know, go ahead. I support you. It doesn't matter
Yeah.
if I'm wrong. That's just, they do steal things. I have heard stories of individual businesses that have had millions of dollars tied up because they do too much business in cash, and it looked like drug transactions.
Wow. Wow. Yeah, I love the idea of 50 different ways of doing things. This marketplace of political philosophy or political systems definitely makes a lot of sense. And I think it would solve a lot of the polarization, the problems that we see nationally, where people are fighting over control of a central thing. Well, if you decentralize it, there's nothing to fight over at that point. So,
Right. And we live in this weird world where the federal law is one thing and the state law is a different thing. And that makes it really hard to do business. It makes it really hard to do banking. It makes it really hard to function when there's no clarity on what you're allowed to do and what you're not allowed to do. Or say the president can sign a bill in one day that you have to flow down that requirement to everybody in your company that you do business with the government, then everybody's got to be vaccinated or you got to fire them. Was that passed by anybody? No. Was that illegal? Yes. But it might take 2 years to go through the courts to find out it was illegal. So we're just going to do it. Just like these anti-gun laws that are in different cities in Colorado, they fully know that what they're doing will not stand up in a court of law. But they think that it doesn't matter. It'll take money out of our opposition's hands, and and we're a government. We have the money, so let's just do it. Let's force them to spend the money to go through the courts to tell us it's illegal. I don't understand any other reason why they would be doing it other than political capital, because there's no way they're going to maintain their assault rifle bans in Boulder and Superior or Broomfield or wherever else they want to try it. That's obviously, the Supreme Court said, illegal, but they can just do it anyways.
yeah. 100%. You got it, man. I mean, I got to tell you, though, one of the reasons they're doing it, I think, is because these little city council members, these little tyrants in Broomfield and Longmont and everywhere else across the Boulder kind of area, they want those checks from the anti-gun lobby. They want that support from Giffords and Bloomberg and all these people for when they run for state legislature. And then most politicians have aspirations of grandeur. So they want to keep moving up, play the game, get the money from those special interest groups. They don't care about the actual people and the effects of the policies.
You're right. And they also, they can do anything they want that has a lawsuit on the other end because they're not personally liable for anything they do. The city
fair point.
will pay the bill.
The taxpayers will pay the bill.
Yeah, I would live far more vicariously if I knew that I had no liability, right? So they could just pass any law they want and do any lawsuit they want. Like Broomfield, where I live, likes to talk the big talk about how they're going to shut down big oil. But there are property rights. People do own things. And if you take those things away, you're going to have to pay them. That's how this current system works. But it's not going to come out of the politicians' pockets. And so they're ultimately they're going to say, we'll do it. And then until they have to pay the piper and someone else gets elected over it, they'll just do whatever they want. And
Wow.
they're feeling confident because they've got 11 out of 11 seats, Democrats. So they do feel like they can do whatever they want, and they have to basically take the city to bankruptcy probably before they get voted out. And even then, will they still retain their jobs if if the city goes bankrupt? I'm not sure at what point voters wake up and actually switch parties, but it's been done other places in this country. It can be done anywhere.
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. Liberty is on the horizon. And it's people like you, people out there who are standing up and being at the forefront of Colorado's liberty movement that are really making a difference. So, Brian, we've talked about, pro-life, the Second Amendment. What are some of the other core issues at the forefront of your campaign? What issues are important to the people of Colorado?
The third thing that makes me different than everyone else and is also important to everybody is World War III. I'm against it. I think nuclear holocausts are bad. And that doesn't mean you have to appease people and give them money and give them land and say it's okay to do stuff. But also you should be doing what you can in the interest of peace. The current funding of the war in Ukraine of what's going to be $100 billion by the end of this year is, on one hand, fiscally irresponsible to borrow money and send it outside of this country when we have all these other things that we could use printed money for or borrowed money for. But on the other hand, it also is going to antagonize the country with the most nuclear bombs in the world. And it gives us leverage over the Ukrainian government to say, no, we're giving you all this, but you can't make a peace deal. So even if Russia and Ukraine could make a peace deal, they're in a position where they can't anymore because we're funding them. So we're sending our tax dollars, which we shouldn't be sending, and prolonging a war with them, which is not good either. It is none of our business. I am not pro-Ukraine or pro-Russia. It's not okay to one country to invade the other, but that doesn't mean I'm going to automatically defend the country getting invaded because I'm not that nationality. I don't care at all what happens. Well, on a human level, like I feel bad for everybody that's getting killed or drafted in this war on the Russian side and the Ukrainian side. The people on the ground actually shooting each other, they're just caught up in something and happen to be in the wrong place at the wrong time, and that really sucks. But I don't feel bad for Zelensky, like the leader of Ukraine. I've got no ties to him. And if there's anybody that's probably getting rich and is going to live and get out of the situation, it's probably Zelensky.
Right.
Also,
some people, yeah.
The Fortune 500 lists usually exclude actual rich people like Putin. Like he's probably number one or number two or something, but it's because he has the whole country. So you can't just look up his stock price. Like he owns Gazprom, if you want to look at it that way. He owns an entire country's natural resources. So he's one of the richest people in the world, and what he's doing is evil. And I don't think any of that is good. But it's also not somebody that we should antagonize and take out debt to antagonize. There's no argument to be made that we should be belligerent in this war.
Well said. Yeah, I mean, it's scary times when we're talking about war and potential nuclear war on the horizon. I mean, that's not something anybody should be looking for or pushing for. I mean, you and I know as libertarians that peace and free exchange of ideas and goods and people are kind of the backbone of civilization. So war is the antithesis of that entirely. And war is also a great excuse for these politicians to get richer, to loot the public treasury and enact their little tyrannical schemes on all of us. Absolutely shocking that we have a government, a federal government that is so hell-bent on war and pushing war across the world.
And we started World War II by cutting off the oil supply to Japan. It's no different today. Oil is everything. Europe is starving from energy. Cutting off Nord Stream 1 and 2 is a similar prelude to a future conflict that we do not want. And the Biden administration has cut off all diplomatic ties with the foreign ministry of Russia. We're not even talking to each other. JFK talked to who is the premier of Russia?
Khrushchev.
Yeah, he talked to Khrushchev. We were about to press the buttons and they talked to each other. and then they pulled back. We took missiles out of Turkey. We're not even talking to each other right now, and that's not good. We could even be at the worst odds possible and still meeting with each other, and we should be, to do anything we can to make sure there's no miscommunications or anything that could possibly start a conflict that we didn't mean to start, right? Like that can happen. So I'm very anti-war, and both of my opponents support Ukraine in different amounts, but ultimately the same thing.
Right. Yeah. What's the difference? What's the difference between the Republican and Democrat U.S. Senate candidates for this year's election on the foreign policy issue? I can't think of a single difference between the two. So, for people keeping track so far, in my mind, Brian is the only pro-life candidate. He's our only strong Second Amendment candidate. He's our only pro-peace candidate here for U.S. Senate in Colorado this year.
And those are my top line issues, 100%. If you want to know about any other issue, I'm an open book, but I'm going strong on those issues.
Nice. Yeah. Three of the most important issues that we have, right? Life, liberty, and really pursuit of happiness. If you think of foreign policy in terms of causing war and causing mass destruction and shutting down markets. I also thought you had a really good analogy, or a really good point you made about shutting down oil. Oil is this lifeblood of our industrial society. And to see these attacks on pipelines, attacks on oil shipments, trying to shut down oil, that's a lot of what's happening in Europe right now. But we see the same thing happening here in Colorado, where we have anti-energy governor and anti-energy legislature and anti-energy politicians in Broomfield and across the Front Range who are trying to shut down our oil pipelines here in our own communities. I mean, it's absolutely crazy to see the same thing happening on so many different levels.
Yes, and it tends to be rich people who are completely in a bubble that don't understand anything about how the world is actually run. Obama's got a multi-million-dollar mansion on Martha's Vineyard in Hawaii, both at sea level. You can pay for the most expensive electricity and it won't even hit his budget. Gas could be $20 a gallon and he won't even know. He won't even care, right? Like it's the people at the top who they want the world to be perfect, but also they want to be able to fly around in their private jets and do whatever they want. It's for the serfs. It's for the middle class and lower classes. They need to be subjugated. They need to do X, Y, and Z. And if solar panels and wind turbines make it so that people can't afford heat, or they lose electricity at night, sounds like their problem. And that's not very social justice, right? Like I actually believe that the free market would provide energy in a cleaner and cheaper manner. And we don't need to force regulations by people who have no idea what they're talking about down on everyone else. To say you must do this, the heck with the consequences, is not a good way to run a society. The communists tried it on their entire society and their society collapsed. We do it on little micro scales for different industries where we control them completely. And those industries are not well run and they're not efficient. If electricity companies had to compete, they'd figure out the most efficient way to provide you with power, and there'd actually be innovation and investment. To a large extent, nuclear power, natural gas stations, they don't receive cutting edge technology because there's not cutting edge profits to be made. They do a cost plus model to provide electricity to most people in the United States. And so it doesn't matter if you cut costs by X, Y, and Z percent. You can't earn the profits that you can't get the return on investment unless you can prove that it fits the narrative for climate change and is X, Y, and Z. Then you can get large profits, but it's not because you made electricity cheaper. It's because you made it greener.
Right. Stick with the agenda and they'll work with you, huh?
Yeah,
Wow.
sell it to the right politicians. And on top of it, if you want to be super pragmatic about it, politicians are moving donor bases when they make decisions. So if oil and gas was largely Democrat donors, they would continue to get all the drilling they wanted. Honestly, I feel like it's just pragmatic like that. They donate to Republicans, and this new donor base of green companies will donate to us. So let's move the funding from them to us. And then we will increase the donations to the Democrat Party. And they put a narrative that sounds good on top of what they want to do. But the ultimate goal, I believe, is just to move funding from, the other party to my party.
Wow, yeah.
And
Hard to argue with that.
well, it's how politics is run. You need billions of dollars to win presidential races. You need tens of millions of dollars to win Senate races around this country. Though there are the oddballs out, like this state senator in New Jersey who raised $100 and won. It can happen, I've got a better chance of winning my U.S. Senate race than Joe O'Dea does.
I love it. Well, that leads me into my next question, and really one of the key points I want to talk about. And, for liberty-minded Coloradans here, I've been absolutely shocked at what Bennett has been doing as U.S. Senator. Our current U.S. Senator, Michael Bennett, has been an absolute authoritarian while serving in the U.S. government. And Coloradans who value freedom urgently want him out of office. So what is your argument, Brian, to Colorado voters who may be inclined to vote for the Republican nominee? I mean, after all, he is the candidate. Most people would say he is the candidate with the best chance of beating Michael Bennett.
I would say that Michael Bennett has a huge registration advantage and a money advantage and has the same principles as my Republican opponent. So I don't see a way forward for the Republican to win. But if you think that principles matter and you don't see your principles in the other parties, then I am your only option. And you should send a message to everybody around the country that you will abandon whatever party you are for the sake of principles. And that if you aren't listened to, they won't get your vote. That is the only way for anyone to listen to you. And what has been happening is major candidates who are well funded but not super principled is that they are going after X, Y, and Z vote, saying things and doing things that poll well, and abandoning people that really care about certain issues and assuming that they will be forced to vote for them because they've got an R or a D. And that, if that is the case, means that your principles don't matter to them and you will not be listened to, and they will not lead you in the way that you want to be led. So occasionally you've got to do what Ralph Nader did in 2000. You got to stand for the opposite side. You got to stand up and say what you believe. You got to have a backbone and you got to stand on principle, come what may.
Wow. Yeah, I like the idea of conservative voters sending a message to the Republican Party saying, you're not holding us hostage. You're not holding my vote hostage. I'm not going to necessarily vote for you if you don't represent my values. And it seems like, Brian, you present a great opportunity for people who are fed up with the establishment, who are fed up with being sold out by these Republican politicians who are rhinos or worse. So, yeah, it's interesting. But I mean, that's one of the biggest questions that I see out there is, all these Republican voters who absolutely despise Bennett, want to stop him, but they don't like the Republicans. So what do? I think that's a great point. I really like your answer there.
And if you want to be clear, it's, Bennett's got a 90% chance of winning, according to the betting markets. He's got all the money, and the Republicans nationally have abandoned Colorado. The only people coming in to campaign for my opponent are people like George W. Bush and Dan Crenshaw and Tom Cotton. And if those people represent you and they're your favorite people, then you go ahead and vote that way. I'm not going after you, man. Like you're lost. But if you actually believe in limited constitutional government, peace, and you're pro-life, send a message and say that Brian is what I believe in. And next time around, if there's a candidate that does not represent you, maybe he'll look at the results, or she, and say, I'm not going to try this. I'm not going to waste my time and money. They'll just knock me out. And if there's somebody saying, we can't vote for them, they're too conservative, you got to support me because I'll get the unaffiliated. Well, now we'll have a counter argument that says, actually, the Libertarians will stand up and take you out of this race if you do that. Because we are the rubber stamp on limited government. If you are a limited government person, we can support you. We don't need to fight each other. If you are not, which is most of the Republicans, if you are not libertarian, we will take you out. There's no reason to support you. There's no reason to vote for the lesser of two evils. So if you're evil, do not apply.
I love it. Great. Well, voters in Colorado have a great opportunity to send a message to the establishment to refuse the question of which of the lesser of the two evils are you going to vote for, and actually make a decision that could actually have big political implications nationally and in our state. So very exciting. Your campaign is getting a lot of excitement. Drawing a lot of attention from Colorado's frustrated Republican voters and a lot of unaffiliated voters too, who don't like the Democrats. The major two political parties have lost trust in the voters in many regards. It seems like unaffiliated is the largest growing voter base. I mean, it is the largest voter base in Colorado, and it continues to keep growing. So, Brian, why should voters who are dissatisfied with the Republicans and Democrats look to the Libertarian Party?
Well, I'll tell you what, if you want to contact me, I will answer. You won't hear anything from staff. You won't get a canned response by email. I don't have corporate donors at all, and I'm not taking donations from anybody who owns any big companies and any multimillionaires. There's no $5,000 a plate dinner. It is a different type of politician that you're voting for, a libertarian. You're saying that, hey, maybe the little guy matters, and I want to be able to be represented as an individual, not just as part of BlackRock Capital, right? It's let's bring this government back to the local communities and individuals so that we can have a government by the people for the people again.
Wow. Yeah, that's a very powerful message, that we don't need to sell out our government to these lobbyists, to these big corporations, to whoever has the most money. We can have a government. We can have a representative system if we elect people who are actually in our community, who are actually just individuals who are working, raising families, going to church, who are just living their lives, and just like us. Who better to represent our community than people similar to us, not these detached politicians who haven't been in a grocery store in 25 years, don't even pump their own gas, who couldn't even tell you the price of a house these days. So I think that's a really inspiring message. And I think it's pretty cool to see that the Libertarian Party can present this type of, populist or more down to earth opportunity for people who want to run for office, and people who want to vote for somebody that's actually a part of their community, not some sort of suit with a $200 haircut.
I would sure like to know what you get out of a $200 haircut. I've had home cut haircuts for the last 10 years, and I think about how I've saved that $200 a year or whatever.
I love it.
I've had a single income family and always worked and never had wonderful expensive vacations, and that's okay. I hope someday I am that millionaire, but I'm not a millionaire yet. And that means if you're not a millionaire, please support me. Go to Piotter.com, give me $20. All of my donors are small donors. There's actually only been 2 donors that have donated above $200. It's all been small donations, and every dollar really counts. It goes a lot further than it would with somebody who's going to spend 10 grand on a commercial or $20,000 on a football 30-second ad. I will take it a lot further than anybody else will.
Awesome. Yeah, great to hear. And just love the message that Republicans and Democrats, the parties have been bought out by corporate special interests and these big lobby groups. But here we have a Libertarian Party who can actually be a representative of the American people and people like you, Brian, who are out there working hard, raising a family and doing everything you can to fight for your values you believe in. So love it. So Brian, how did you become a libertarian? What led you to the Libertarian Party, the libertarian philosophy? How did you get there?
Ron Paul 2008. I was watching the presidential debates. I was listening to Ron Paul talk about the Iraq War, and through his campaign, I ended up reading End the Fed by Ron Paul. From that book, I moved on to other books and other podcasts, people that were involved in the circle of the campaign, Peter Schiff, Tom Woods, Gary North. By reading and listening to people, I became more well-read. And then it wasn't until I got into the Austrian School of Economics, watching Mises University and reading Hayek, von Mises, the Austrian school writers, and a lot of Rothbard. I mean, one book is 1,000 pages of Rothbard. So probably my favorite author, even though I don't agree with him on everything. That guy was fantastic. And he would go into rabbit hole after rabbit hole, which is the kind of reading I like to do anyways. So it was an educational experience, self-led. I was very excited for people like Rand Paul in 2016. I was in the Republican Party until 2 years ago. And it was not until I saw the Republican Party of Colorado for what it was that I realized this is not going to be a successful endeavor and mostly a waste of my time. You know, if you go to a Republican Party event in Colorado, I've got nothing against old people. They've got lots of wisdom, but what's missing is young people. And when you go to a Libertarian event, you know, we're not all 18, but we're all young. It's less gray hair than people who have color in their hair, right? We've got youth and energy on our side. And I think that this is a movement that's going to see success in the coming decade. So if you have energy, you want to get involved. You know, we don't know everything that we're doing because we don't have the wisdom the Republican Party has, but we got the youth. It's hard to have both. We got the youth and energy. Come be a part of it. Go to lp.org, join the Libertarian Party, be involved. We'll put you to work, even if we don't know what to do with you yet. We'll still make sure you're doing something. And it's through the next few years that we're going to gain all this experience and learn how to become successful. And that starts right now.
Awesome. Awesome. An inspiring, powerful message. I mean, this generational shift of people who are young people waking up to what's going on in our society, seeing the failures of the old guard and saying, maybe we can do better. Maybe we can have more freedom. Maybe we can have a little bit better life, a wealthier society, a more peaceful society, a better place to raise our families. And how do we do that? Well, we choose liberty. We choose freedom to do it. So awesome, man. I'm so excited to talk to you. It's been a really great time. And I got to say, I've read some Rothbard as well. Ethics of Liberty was one of the books that really shifted my perspective on a lot of things. And it was one of those light bulb moments for me that kind of was like, oh, okay, here's how a liberty society would work. So awesome. We'll have to talk more about some philosophy in the future. But Brian, how can people support your campaign?
Go to Piotter.com, Peotter.com. Everything is there. You can find me there, my social media, sign up, be a part of my email list, everything there. There's no better way to do it.
Perfect. Perfect. And then, Brian, one last question. What is your advice for Coloradans who want to make an impact in politics?
My advice is don't knock on doors and call people who don't want to change their minds, who don't want to listen. Find the people that are open. At any one point in time, a small percentage of people are ready to have their minds changed and start moving in a different direction. Don't waste your time on the people that have already decided what's right and wrong or aren't interested. Go find the people that are interested and are open and have conversations with them. You know, seek them out, establish friendships and build that group. You're not gonna you're not going to change the world going to a Tea Party organization or someplace where it's a group of friends that already know what they believe, right? They may be people to recruit into what you're doing, but if you're trying to change minds and win hearts, you need to go find those people, probably at groups that are not politically oriented, or at neighborhood events, or at the park. Go meet them out in the world where they are and find them, and one at a time convert them over to the message. That is how we change the world. It is not through tweets, emails, groups where everybody there believes the same thing already. You have to go find people and change their minds, and that starts with you on an individual level.
Awesome. Awesome, Brian. Well, man, I am so excited to talk to you. I really appreciate you taking the time out. Definitely have my vote come November, and I'm really excited to see how your campaign plays out. If there's anything I can do for you, please let me know. But best wishes, Brian. Thank you very much for being here, and hope to talk to you again soon.
Thanks, Brandon. Appreciate you having me on.